Chapter 13. The Surprise that Everybody Saw Coming. While the dwarves remained in their besieged house, hemmed in by the Queen's royal guard, and with Lily-White dead in their basement, the Queen was being dragged behind her out-of-control carriage, shrieking. Her driver continued on, oblivious to the problem. Huncules, also in the carriage, had turned around in his seat and was laughing at the Queen. "Oh, Hunk, ow! You ouch, please!" yelled the Queen as her head smacked against rock after rock. "You'll pay for this!" None of the Queen's men had charged with the carriage, and now watched the scene in horror. As the carriage neared the dwarves' house, an arrow shot forth from a high window and hit one of the horses. The carriage veered sharply to the left as the horse fell. Up ahead was a steep gorge that nobody had noticed was there before. The driver froze in panic. Huncules screamed, but he still had his wits, and he dove from the carriage at just the last moment before it flew off the cliff. Huncules turned back in time to see the Queen's furious face as she fell over the cliff with the carriage. Some say that her last words were, "Huncules, you idiot!" But Huncules held ever after that she had announced, "Huncules, your heroics have earned you great merit. As such, you are hereby decreed the first king of the queendom. All of my riches, land, and power are now yours. Farewell, most noble and smoking hot man." No matter what she said, the carriage fell to the basin of the cliff, and one horse, the carriage, the driver, and the Queen fell and exploded in a violent, gory mess. A moment of silence passed as the Queen's men, Huncules, and the dwarves took in the scene. Huncules stood up, scanning the battlefield, and announced in as loud a voice as he could, "The witch is dead!" Never mind that the Queen had never really demonstrated any witchcraft. Applause and cheers erupted from the dwarves' house, and from most of the Queen's royal guard. The general could be seen to be nodding happily. Huncules walked back to the assembled men. On the way, he picked up the Queen's red battle crown and tossed it on top of his head. "I am now," he announced, "Queen!" The soldiers looked to each other, puzzled. "King!" said Huncules. Mutters and cheers greeted Huncules as he returned to the men. The general approached him immediately. "Huncules," he said, "if the Queen has died, then a council must be assembled to find the palest woman in the queendom. Besides, you're a man. You can't rule the queendom." "You're wrong," Huncules said, turning on the man. "I am king." "I can't allow you to do this," said the general defiantly. Huncules chuckled to himself, faced away from the general, then spun around and punched him square in the jaw. The general fell to the ground, knocked out cold. The dwarves, though still threatened by about 400 soldiers, had already broken out the mead and were singing. "Won't be long till her army routs," stated Stumpy. "Yeah," said Tricky. "Then we'll go pillage the Queen's city." He cackled in joy. "There'll be so much chaos, we can loot the city for days." The dwarves cheered. "And burn the city," called Gory. A loud, disgusting noise burst forth, and Farty came huffing up the stairs. "Can't," he said, out of breath, "believe it." To the disbelief and rage of the dwarves, Lily-White, alive, walked into the room.